Welcome into the Irish NFL show, a special interview, a special guest, a familiar face to the Irish NFL show, Peter King from NBC. Peter has been on with us previously, well known for his coverage of Sky Sports, the great article every Monday football morning in America. Peter, fantastic to have you back on the show.
Hey, Brian, always love being on the show. Thank you.
Peter, we last caught up in person in Munich last year, and I was keen to have you on the show this week. Obviously, we're a week. We've got this weekend, obviously, to get through in terms of the games, but we are essentially nearly a week out from Frankfurt, and obviously the big game between the Chiefs and the Dolphins. I just quickly want to get your thoughts on it because we got a great game last year, and you spoke very highly of the fact of being in Munich at the game. Do you think the NFL could ever foreseen the nature of the game in which they've selected for next week? Because arguably this is probably the best game that would potentially to be played across this side of the world, bearing in mind where the two teams are going this season.
I mean, if you live in Germany, how many games have there been in England? Like 30? I don't know off the top of my head, but
Yeah.
at least 20. And the game last year and the game this year are the two best games that the NFL has ever had in the international series. First of all, Tom Brady in his last year, and Brady comes up big in that game, kind of a semi-upset. Munich was absolutely on fire. I just could not believe the reception that the game got there. And I had a bunch of people there last year. Wait till you get to Frankfurt. And I didn't even know I was going to go this year, but when I saw the games that were scheduled, I'm not going to the second one, but I am going to this one. I said, this is one of the 5, 6, 8 best games of the season, period, no matter where it's played. And so I said, I really want to go to this game. And it's kind of interesting. I think NBC likes me going to these games because last year I was able to get Brady on camera after the game for a little bit. And this year it'll be the same thing. I mean, I have worked to make sure that whoever the winning quarterback is in this game, I'm probably going to get him after the game for a few minutes for Football Night in America, the NBC Sunday night show.
Yeah.
But I think what makes this game so interesting is that on one side, you've got the best quarterback on the planet in Patrick Mahomes. And on the other side, you've got the best offense on the planet. And it's just really, really coincidentally cool that this is the way that it worked out. So fans in Germany are very lucky.
Yeah, we did a podcast earlier today, and it's probably a way too early podcast around MVP and potential players, but we spoke about, from a betting perspective, the top two players in the MVP category at the moment is Tua and it is Patrick Mahomes, and we get to see them face off. Just one final question on the game itself, and it's going to kind of bring me into this AFC East conversation. The Dolphins are having a great season. Do they need to get this kind of marquee victory to kind of set themselves up for where teams will really take them seriously as potential front runners later in the season? Because they lost in Philadelphia last weekend, they lost to the Bills. Do they need to get a really marquee victory? And maybe this is the one that they get next week potentially in Frankfurt.
I mean, they haven't beaten a team with a winning record yet, so there's going to be skepticism for a team. Look, all you can do is play the teams on your schedule. So, the schedule falls the way the schedule falls. But it just so happens that the two teams they played that are good, Buffalo 4-3, obviously Philadelphia 6-1. They lost to Buffalo by 28. They lost to Philadelphia by 14. You can say whatever you want about, 2 games, whatever. I mean, people are going to be skeptical of the Dolphins, but still, they've got a great offensive team. And clearly now, the fact that Tyreek Hill is probably going to be okay for the game. We'll see if he re-injures his hip against New England on Sunday. But, the one thing that you do need to make this a marquee matchup is you need the two great receivers to play in the game. Tyreek Hill for Miami and Travis Kelce for Kansas City. So, and as of now, they both look like they'll play. The quarterbacks will play. So it'll be a great game. But, you're right. I mean, Miami has got to win one of these games against a great team, and which they just haven't done yet.
In terms of the Buffalo Bills, and obviously we're recording this pre the Thursday night football game in which they're going to host the Buccaneers, but I read at various different outlets this week around people are suggesting the Bills aren't as good as people have made them out to be. Earlier, they put the 48 points down on the Dolphins and they've struggled since, and they really could have been on a 3-game slide if the Giants had been more efficient in the red zone. And is it primarily down to the fact that they've lost Milano and other various different players within the defense that they just haven't? I suppose they are the leading knights in that defense, and they're going to struggle without them. Or is it just a case of they can get it back on track, and it's just a case of where they are at this stage of the season?
I really think that Buffalo surprisingly has really struggled, I think, protecting Josh Allen. And, you hate, if you're the Bills, you hate your team to have a quarterback who, is under attack a lot. Now, Josh Allen's only been sacked 10 times in 7 games. As you say, this is prior to the Thursday night game. But I don't know, every game I've watched, he's running for his life. And, look, I think one of the things that Sean McDermott and Josh Allen and Ken Dorsey, the offensive coordinator, talked about this offseason is we do not want to expose you to injury as much as you have been in the last few years. And so I think the way I look at it is I don't think he has rushed too much so far this year. He's averaged like 4 rushes a game through 7 weeks. But I think that they have to tighten up their coverage and or decide that they're going to keep an extra tight end in consistently. Because as of now, and again, it's early, but as of now, this quarterback has taken too many hits.
He was pressurized 9 times in the game last Sunday. Now, they didn't necessarily result in sacks, but 9 times in which he had to scramble. And I think of the 9 times, only 3 plays resulting in the positive yardage in terms of the play itself. That's kind of evident to what you're saying there, Peter.
I think, what the Bills have to do now, and look, they love their quarterback to throw the ball downfield. And, the other problem is Dawson Knox is hurt right now. So their ace tight end is out. They got to rely on Dalton Kincaid. And so I think they didn't draft Dalton Kincaid to be the only guy. He's more of an offensive player than a blocker. They didn't draft him to be the only guy. They drafted him to be part of a two-headed tight end group. And so, that is one thing that has been missing, the consistent threat with playing 2 tight ends a lot. So I think until they get that back, and again, look, it's easy to sit here and say, hey, take away the deep throws and all that stuff. And I mean, look, combined, Gabe Davis and Stephon Diggs are averaging 13-something per reception, which is great. That's what you want out of your 2 starting receivers. But I do think that it's come at a cost, and that cost has been some abuse of Josh Allen, even when he isn't sacked.
Just want to jump into the AFC North, and in particular the Cleveland Browns, because there's so many various different outlets of conversation at the moment regarding Deshaun Watson. Last weekend, they suggested he had a shoulder injury and looked more like a concussion potential injury, and they could have put him back into the game. They didn't. He's not going to play this Sunday. And I don't know if it's buyer's remorse or anything to that effect, but it just doesn't seem like it's really right. And I read a really good article saying they're a quarterback away from being a really strong team, bearing in mind how good Jim Schwartz has turned his defense around. And yet, you would think they have that quarterback in-house, but it's obviously not working out. Where do you sit on this Deshaun Watson saga? Because it just something doesn't seem right at the moment.
Something's wrong. Something's weird. I talked to a general manager in the league last night, We had a long conversation. I hadn't talked to him since the start of the season, and so we went over 10 things. And the longest amount of time we spent was on Deshaun Watson. And he goes, "What do you think is going on there?" And I said, I'll tell you what I think is very strange. And this is something that over the years you tend to notice if you watch football a lot. Okay, so Deshaun Watson plays 11 snaps. He's removed from the game. And when he's removed from the game and he comes to the sidelines, I watched a lot of the Cleveland-Indianapolis game. I'd bet that the camera showed him 12 to 15 times on the sidelines during the game after he came out. And you know what, Brian? He was always alone. Now, you might say, big deal. He's always alone. I want you to count the next big Kansas City game you watch. And on the sidelines, when he's not on the field, watch when they show Patrick Mahomes. And you'll say, he's never alone. He's always talking to Matt Nagy, the offensive coordinator, or Andy Reid, or Kelsey, or somebody. And in this game, now you might say, well, Deshaun Watson wasn't playing. He was a bystander. He's a spectator. I mean, okay. But it's just really weird that every time they showed him, he was just a bystander, not having any involvement in talking to PJ Walker, his replacement at quarterback, talking to anybody. It just is strange. And look, about 3 weeks ago, when all of a sudden he doesn't play in a game, and afterwards the head coach, Kevin Stefanski, said, yeah, we passed him. He could have played, but he thought that, our doctors, approved him playing in the game, but he just thought that, he was hurt a little bit too much. Just going to tell you this, Brian. I'm not in the business of judging how much a guy is hurt, but in my opinion, when something like that happens, you're going to have a lot of guys in your locker room saying, I'm playing with this, and a sprain this, and a bruise this, and all that other stuff. And this guy gets approved to play by our doctors, and he says, I can't go. That didn't go over really well with some players on that team. So, Brian, I just think this is a very strange thing, because here we are. We are approaching the midpoint of the season. In 2 weeks, we will be at the midpoint of this season. Do you have any idea whether Deshaun Watson's any good or not? I don't. He used to be good, but last year when he came back, he was lousy. This year, first third of the season, maybe you don't call him lousy, but he has not been very good. And all I know is that the Cleveland Browns are not getting what they paid for.
I'll throw this out there. I don't think players taking years out of the game ever reflects well on the player. He took the year out from Houston. Obviously, had the circumstances there after the following season. I reflect on Le'Veon Bell. He made that business decision not to play for the Steelers that year. He never was the same running back again. I know it's a completely different decision, but he was never the same player again.
That's the problem. The problem, I think, I don't know. I'm an old man covering this game, but football players should play football during football season. And, I don't know exactly how it is around the world. So I can't tell you if there's a hurler or a rugby player or somebody from Ireland, some great athlete from Ireland who people have questioned whether he should play or whether he shouldn't. And again, I don't like to get into that business because I'm not in Deshaun Watson's body. I can't tell. All I know is that I think, and this is me, this is not gospel, it's just my opinion. In my opinion, when you make $46 million a year and you are in some pain and you're having problems, but you probably could play if you absolutely had to. And again, I don't know if Deshaun Watson falls into this category. It may be too excruciating for him to play. But I've never heard of a team, of a coach of a team saying, well, we passed him. We thought he could play, but he was hurting too much. I don't know. It just doesn't sit right with me.
Yeah. Big time of players playing, and there's going to be a lot of players feisty on Sunday in MetLife in New Jersey. We've got the Giants and the Jets playing. Obviously, you're quite local in terms of understand the nature of the rivalry, and the rivalry over the course of the last few days, in particular around the New York outlets and various different radio channels, has been kind of got feisty, where we have the likes of Carl Banks being removed from the airwaves. Albeit I haven't listened to it. I didn't think I don't think Carl Banks did anything in particular to cause himself being removed from the radio. However, I as a Giants fan, I reflect on this rivalry. It reminds me a little bit of 2011 when Rex Ryan was the head coach, and not necessarily that any of the coaches are coming out and having pops at each other, but I do get the sense there's a bit more of a fierce rivalry going into this one. Is that because of the nature of where the teams are? Like, it is, like, I look at the Giants' schedule, bearing in mind it's softening up slightly. I know every NFL team says the same thing about no matter who they're playing, but there is opportunities to win games thereafter if they were to get to 3-5. And the Jets will feel the same, bearing in mind they have games coming down the schedule. Is that the nature of where we're at, that both teams recognize this as a real must-win type of game for both sides?
Well, the Giants can probably wave goodbye to their season. Not that they've got a great chance anyway if they don't win this game. And the way that the Jets defense has frustrated Patrick Mahomes and Jalen Hurts, the two Super Bowl quarterbacks from last year, and as bad as the Giants line has been in general, now it's been better the last 2 weeks, but as bad as the line has been in general, I can't see the Giants winning this game. Who knows? And you talk about the rivalry. The one thing about the NFL scheduling that is downright stupid is that you realize in the last 10 years, last decade, the Jets and Giants have played each other twice.
Yeah.
It's just stupid. There's no room in the NFL for creating rivalries, regional rivalries. They just don't do it. They don't care about it. And I think it's a huge mistake. The Giants and Jets should play every year. Baltimore and Washington should play every year. The Steelers and the Eagles, who were once a combined franchise during World War II, should play every year. Houston and Dallas should play every year. And you've got all these regional rivalries, and the NFL does nothing about them. And I just think it's absurd. But be that as it may, I like the Jets this weekend.
A couple of weeks ago, people were suggesting the 49ers were the standout team in the NFL. I think we've been guilty of doing that a couple of times this year, because when the Bills, we touched on the Bills already, they put a 48 on the Dolphins.
The Cowboys early on, you know?
It's amazing how quickly it can turn, and it certainly has turned on the 49ers over the course of the past 2 weeks, having lost their first game in an unusual manner in Cleveland. Obviously, the field goal was missed at the end. And then on Monday Night Football, when everybody felt they might get back on track, albeit with injuries, they lay an egg. And I think ultimately the play before halftime that Steve Wilkes has been, I wouldn't say he's been criticized for, but it was an unusual move to go blitz.
He's been criticized for it. You can say that, Brian.
I'm trying to be nice because there's a lot of 49ers fans here in Ireland, so I have to be very careful about who I'm.
I bet they were throwing their shoes at the TV on Sunday on Monday or Tuesday morning when they saw that. I would have been if I were a 49er fan.
They had a big watch party here a couple of weeks ago, the 49ers fans. It was the night of the Cleveland Browns game. And we said to them, what have you done? Have you put the mockers on this team? Because since then, they've lost both games. But this weekend is going to be intriguing because they brought in Sam Darnold for me for particular games and scenarios like this where he can come in and game manage. He can't be effective over the course of time, but in an instance where he's needed for 1 or 2 games, he can come in and do a sufficient job. Bearing in mind who they've got this weekend in the Bengals, who really need it coming off the bye week. Is this a difficult one for the 49ers? Bearing in mind they've also got injuries to combat against as well.
It's going to be a really difficult one for the 49ers. But I'll tell you, we don't know if Brock Purdy will play. I tend to think he probably won't. because of his concussion. But here's why I'm not worried about the 49ers. 49ers are going to make the playoffs. And the one thing it sounds funny, but I'm not worried at all about Brock Purdy. He'll be fine, assuming the concussion is not that bad. I'll tell you what I am worried about. Their defense has 15 sacks in 7 games. That is ridiculous. That is too light a number. Okay. And sacks don't rule everything. Okay. But when you think about it, you should average at least, if you're a really good pass rush, you should average at least 3 sacks a game. Okay. And the 49ers are not doing that. They're averaging 2.1 a game. That worries me a little bit. But I'll tell you the biggest reason why, if I were the 49ers, I wouldn't be that worried. Because at some point you get Deebo Samuel back. You get Trent Williams back. He's one of the best left tackle in football. You've had to play a couple of games now with either a damaged or a missing Trent Williams against 2 of the best pass rushers in football, Myles Garrett and Danielle Hunter. Yeah. And yet still, if their kicker, makes a 40-yard field goal, which every NFL kicker should make 99 out of 100 times. If he just makes that 2 weeks ago, the Niners get out of there with a win. And this past week, playing without Deebo, playing without Trent Williams, I understand a road loss to a team with a powerful offense, even without Justin Jefferson. So I'm not that worried about the 49ers, honestly. I think they're going to be fine, and they will be in it and a Super Bowl threat by January.
This story has slightly gone away because of the fact that they were on the bye week, but Frank Reich did a very interesting press conference.
Very interesting.
In which it was, I think he was kind of, I think ultimately what we got out of it was he was suggesting that the quarterback essentially who he wanted in the draft is not necessarily the one he has as his number 1 quarterback now. And this weekend they're going to face off against each other in terms of Bryce Young and CJ Stroud. Is Frank Reich in a way kind of going to navigate in a position where if it doesn't go as well as he'd hoped, he can essentially get out of Carolina and say, look, ultimately the owner has dictated decisions and that's not what I'm in for.
The only problem with that thought, Brian, is that I know there has been a lot said about taking Bryce Young. And did Frank Reich really want to take him? I would say of the coaches in the NFL, I know Frank Reich is one of the 3 or 4 guys who I know the best. I've known him forever since he was a player for the Buffalo Bills 32 years ago. So I had several conversations with Frank Reich before the draft. He wanted Bryce Young. This is not phony. It's not revisionist history. He wanted Bryce Young. He loved Bryce Young. Now, if the owner and all of the guys on his team wanted CJ Stroud, what would he have done? I can't tell you. But I believe that he really liked Bryce Young. And I also think it is just way too early to say that CJ Stroud's going to be better than Bryce Young. He looks like it right now. But, I mean, first of all, the offensive line in Carolina is not good. And, he's been beaten up quite a bit mentally and physically. I would say let's give Bryce Young some time. He had too good of a career entering the NFL before you say this guy can't do it. Now, I'm seeing some signs that worry me, but I would like to give Bryce Young some time. And you're right. I think it's odd that Frank Reich gave the play calling to Thomas Brown. Very odd. And I've not talked to Reich this week, so I don't know the real story deep down. I think he's just trying to give his offense a spark. and we'll see if he can give them a spark coming up against Houston this week.
Yeah. Just conscious of your time, Peter's one of the final questions. It's kind of a two-tiered questions around two particular head coaches, both in the AFC West. Brandon Staley, a lot of Chargers fans over this side of the world as well are getting frustrated with the play calling and how the games are going, and Justin Herbert doesn't seem to be playing at the level in which he was last year. Is he the coach who makes most sense for being on the hot seat? And then the other one is around Sean Payton. Obviously, he did those comments before the season started, and things don't seem to be working there. Don't seem to improve with the Russell Wilson, but they've got this massive contract. Do you see any narrative or any way that they could potentially get out of that in the long term, or is it just one of those situations that they have to live with what they have for a couple of years? If they end up in top 5, top 6, for example, in the draft, do they take in that quarterback and just find a way to navigate around Russell Wilson, or am I being a bit unfair?
That's a really good question. I think the biggest issue in Denver right now, and look, it hasn't been perfect with Russell Wilson, but it's been better than it was last year at this point. Yeah. So I don't think I would be ready to give up on Russell Wilson yet in Denver. That's the first part of it. The second part is, I've never had $70 billion in my life, but the people who own the Denver Broncos do. But one of the ways you make $70 billion is not to give away $100 million just a few months after you decided that this was the guy who you wanted to coach your team. It's like if you bring in a manager of Walmart and you pay him $1 jillion, how are you going to feel after 8 months, 9 months sacking him? You're probably not going to feel real good about it, and I doubt you would do it. I doubt sincerely that the Broncos would consider getting rid of Peyton no matter what happens this year. Okay, that's one thing. You ask about Brandon Staley. Brandon Staley's got to have a good year. He just does. It's going to be very hard for Dean Spanos, the owner of the Chargers, to say to his fans, here, renew the season tickets. I know we just went 6-11. Renew your season tickets, and Brandon Staley's coming back. I don't think he would do that. I think it would be very, very interesting. And I'm not saying this would happen because I don't know how much money the ownership group has now in San Diego. You always hear things like, not that they're strapped for cash, but that they're not going to go out and waste a lot. I think it would be very interesting to see what the Chargers would do if Bill Belichick was on the market. Yeah. He's a guy who I could see coming in mentally. If I'm Bill Belichick, I'm saying, I don't care how bad the owner is. I could care less. I want Justin Herbert. Who wouldn't want to have Justin Herbert as the quarterback? So I don't know what's going to happen. But I think unless the Chargers play a lot better in the last 11 weeks than they have in the first 6 weeks for them, it's not looking good for Brandon Staley.
Yeah, you could certainly argue if he was to be relieved of his duties come the offseason, it would be one of the more attractive opportunities for a head coaching position, bearing in mind you said you've got Justin Herbert. Peter, we really appreciate your time as always. You're always very courteous.
No problem, Brian. Really enjoyed it. Look forward to seeing you in Germany.
And we will look forward to see you next week in Frankfurt for the Chiefs against the Dolphins. Enjoy this weekend. Enjoy all the action. Really appreciate it of your time. Looking forward to having you on again.
Take care.
Thank you.